February 14th was supposed to be a celebration of love, but in one quiet Florida neighborhood, it turned into a scene of unimaginable horror. A decorated officer, a wife and mother, returned home early to surprise her husband on Valentine's Day. What she walked into shattered every belief she had about love, family, and justice. By the end of that night, 15 bullets echoed through the walls of their home, and a respected pastor lay dying in a pool of secrets. If you're drawn to stories that reveal the hidden truths behind closed doors, where justice, love, and betrayal collide, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. This is the last confession, and what you're about to hear will stay with you long after it's over. Officer Maya Richardson was more than just a name on a badge. For 15 years, Maya wore the uniform with quiet pride. A tactical mind in high-pressure situations. A calm voice during chaos. Her record? Flawless. No disciplinary actions. No complaints. Just a long trail of commendations and the respect of her peers. To her colleagues, she was the kind of officer every department wanted more of. To her community, she was the law. And to her family, she was the rock. A mother. A wife. A woman who kept everything together, even when everything threatened to fall apart. But beneath the polished exterior, something was unraveling. At the pulpit of New Grace Baptist Church stood Reverend Daniel Richardson. The kind of preacher who could make the walls tremble with his voice, then soften hearts with a single verse. He wasn't just a man of faith, he was a local celebrity. A shepherd to the lost. A mentor to troubled youth. A fixture at town halls and charity events. People didn't just listen to Pastor Daniel, they followed him. Believed in him. And in the eyes of the congregation, Daniel and Maya were more than just husband and wife. They were a symbol. The ideal. Proof that faith and service could live under one roof. But as any seasoned detective will tell you, appearances lie. And in this story, they lie a lot. February 14th, just before sunset. Maya clocked out early from her shift, carrying a small bouquet of red roses and a box of chocolates in the passenger seat of her patrol car. She hadn't done this in years. Not like this. Not with butterflies in her stomach. The plan was simple: surprise Daniel with dinner, talk through the distance that had crept in between them, and maybe, just maybe, reignite what felt lost. As the tires rolled over the familiar path home, Maya's thoughts drifted between memories and regrets. Late nights. Missed conversations. Unspoken questions. But still, hope. Because tonight, she wasn't Officer Richardson. She was just Maya. A woman in love. A wife trying to save her marriage. She had no idea what she was about to walk into. And no training could prepare her for it. The house was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet that welcomes you after a long day. Not the soft hush of peace. No. This was different. Officer Maya Richardson stepped through the front door expecting the familiar. The warm sound of jazz playing softly from the Bluetooth speaker. The scent of garlic or baked chicken drifting from the kitchen. Daniel's voice calling from the back room, "You're home early." But there was none of that. No laughter. No clinking of pans. No music. Just silence, thick, unnatural, and still. She paused just inside the threshold, her keys still in hand. Her brow furrowed. Something felt wrong. A low pulse of unease began to rise in her chest. She knew the rhythms of her home. She knew what it was supposed to feel like. And this wasn't it. "Daniel," she called out. No response. "Isaiah?" Still nothing. She glanced down the hallway. The lights were off. The living room was untouched. Her Valentine's Day surprise, the roses, the chocolates, the carefully chosen words in the card, still clutched in her hand, suddenly felt out of place. Her fingers tightened. And then, something shifted inside her. It wasn't just worry. It was instinct. The same sharpened alertness she'd relied on in dark alleyways and domestic standoffs, it now filled her own home. She moved slowly, deliberately. Her eyes scanning the familiar shadows. Every creak of the floorboard under her boot made her flinch. Her training wasn't telling her what was wrong, only that something was. The hallway narrowed. The air grew colder. Then she heard it. Faint. Almost inaudible. A voice. A boy's voice. Muffled. Strangled by something, maybe distance, maybe fear. It came from the direction of the master bedroom. The one she shared with Daniel. The one where they had once knelt together in prayer, made love, fought over bills, dreamed aloud about growing old. She moved faster now. The sound came again, a short, broken gasp. And then a whisper, "Please." Her heart dropped. Maya pushed the bedroom door open. What she saw stopped the world from turning. Daniel, her husband, the father figure she had trusted with a boy they both swore to protect, stood half-dressed at the foot of their bed. His pants were pulled down. And in front of him, trembling, confused, frozen in shame, was Isaiah. 14 years old. Their adopted son. A child they had promised to love. Maya couldn't move. For a split second, her mind rebelled. Tried to rewrite the scene. Tried to pretend it didn't make sense. That maybe she had misunderstood. But she hadn't. This was no misunderstanding. This was horror. Raw and real. Something that shattered every belief she'd ever held about the man standing before her. Daniel turned, his face flushed, not with guilt, but with fear. The kind of fear predators have when they're caught. "Maya, it's not what it looks like," he said, hands half raised, voice trembling. "You're not thinking straight." But she was. In fact, she'd never been clearer. She lunged for Isaiah first. Wrapped him in her arms. Pulled him away from the bed, away from Daniel, away from the sickening scene that would be burned into both of their memories forever. The boy didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just clung to her, silent and shaking. Maya guided him to the corner of the room, whispering softly, "You're okay. I've got you. You're safe now." Then she turned. And looked Daniel in the eyes. And for the first time in their marriage, she saw a stranger. He stepped toward her, panicked now, stumbling over his words. "He misunderstood," he said. He's been acting out lately. I was trying to discipline him, that's all." He made a move. Maya stared at him, stunned. And then he said it. "He came on to me." The words fell like a blade. And something inside her, something sacred, snapped. Because this wasn't just betrayal. This was calculated. Predatory. Evil hiding behind scripture. Corruption cloaked in the voice of a preacher. She'd heard enough. Her hand moved instinctively to her side, her off-duty holster still clipped to her waistband. She didn't draw her weapon. Not yet. But the weight of it grounded her. It reminded her that she wasn't just a wife tonight. She was a mother. And more than that, she was an officer sworn to protect the innocent. Isaiah was still shaking behind her. Daniel kept talking. The words were frantic now, desperate. "He's confused, Maya. You know how teenagers are. Hormones. Temptation. He needs help. You need to shut up," Maya snapped, her voice low and razor-sharp. She took a step forward. Her presence filled the room now, not as a broken wife, but as a woman rising from the ashes of betrayal. Daniel reached out a hand. Wrong move. Her weapon was drawn in a heartbeat. "Sit down." He obeyed. Slowly. Hands trembling. Her aim didn't waver. "I want you to listen to me," she said. "You will not speak to him. You will not move. You will not breathe in this house without my say-so." He nodded, lips tight. The predator playing the victim. She turned to Isaiah. "Go to the guest room," she said gently. "Lock the door. I'll be there soon." He obeyed without a word. The door clicked shut. And just like that, Maya was alone with the man she used to call her husband. The man she once admired. The man who had just destroyed everything. There would be police reports. Investigations. Courtrooms. Trauma counselors. There would be media vans outside their house and whispers in the church pews. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, there was just the truth. And Maya saw it, clear as day. Her home was no longer a sanctuary. Her marriage had been a lie. And the man who once blessed their meals had violated their child. She kept the gun steady, even as her hand trembled. Because in that moment, between duty and devastation, rage and resolve, she remembered who she was. An officer. A mother. And no matter what it took, she would make sure Isaiah never had to fear this man again. Because justice starts at home. And on this Valentine's Day, in a house once filled with love, the only thing left standing was a woman who refused to let evil go unanswered. There are moments that split a person in half. Before and after. Light and shadow. Silence and sound. This was Maya Richardson's. The hallway was still. The kind of stillness that feels like the world holding its breath. Behind the guest room door, Isaiah sat curled in a corner, still trembling, still trying to make sense of what had just been torn open. And in the master bedroom, Daniel Richardson, preacher, husband, father, sat on the edge of the bed with his hands shaking and eyes darting, not in remorse, but in panic. His words had stopped. The silence between him and Maya was the kind that nothing could cross. Not faith. Not history. Not blood. Maya stood in the doorway, her service weapon still drawn. Not shaking. Not shouting. Just staring. Everything in her body was quiet. A strange, hollow calm that officers know too well, the space between impulse and action, where emotion gives way to instinct. And then, she moved. She didn't scream. She didn't warn. She didn't ask for another explanation. She raised the gun, slow and deliberate, and squeezed the trigger. 1 shot. 2. 3. Each crack of gunfire echoed off the bedroom walls like thunder in a church. 4. 5. 6. She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. There was no hesitation. No pause to reflect. Because this wasn't just rage. This was release. 7. 8. 9. Each bullet carried the weight of every lie she'd swallowed. The years she spent defending his character. The boys she saw in his orbit, too close, too quiet, and the times she told herself it was nothing. 10. 11. 12. The blood sprayed across the beige walls. The same walls where family portraits used to hang. The same ones Isaiah walked past every day, never saying a word. 13. 14. 15. And then, silence. Real silence. Not the tense quiet from before, this was deeper. Final. A hush that comes only after something irreversible. Daniel slumped to the floor, lifeless. The body of a man whose secrets had finally outlived him. Maya didn't speak. She lowered the weapon slowly, as if even gravity had to mourn what had just happened. She walked down the hall, her boots heavy with the weight of justice, or maybe consequence. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. She opened the guest room door. Isaiah looked up at her, eyes wide, cheeks streaked with silent tears. She crossed the room, dropped to her knees, and held him. Tight. Protective. Final. And in a voice barely above a whisper, she said the only words that mattered now. He'll never touch you again. Isaiah said nothing. He didn't need to. His arms wrapped around her like a lifeline. Somewhere, not far, a dog barked. A car passed by. Life outside still moved, unaware of what had just unfolded in the heart of a quiet Florida home. But not for long. The neighbors heard the shots. 15 in rapid succession. A woman across the street dialed 911. Within minutes, red and blue lights would paint the front yard. Sirens would fill the silence that Maya had carved out with steel and instinct. But she didn't run. She didn't pace. She didn't speak. She led Isaiah to the couch, sat beside him, and gently rested his head on her shoulder. Then, with the same precision she had once used in active duty, she walked into the kitchen. She placed her service weapon, now empty, still warm, on the granite countertop. And waited. No prayers. No apologies. Just truth. And the certainty that some acts don't require permission. Because justice doesn't always wear a badge. And sometimes, the law comes second to what a mother knows in her bones. That no courtroom could make this right. That no sentence could undo what had already been done. That sometimes, the only justice left is final. By the time the sirens reached the house, Maya Richardson was already standing in the doorway, waiting. She didn't run. She didn't explain. She didn't resist. Her service weapon sat quietly on the kitchen counter, empty, surrendered, like her silence. The first officer to enter the home knew her. They'd shared a beat once, years ago. Trained together. He'd even attended her wedding. Now, his eyes couldn't meet hers. He just raised his hand and read her the words she had spoken to others 100 times before. You have the right to remain silent. Maya nodded, said nothing, and turned her wrists behind her back. Outside, the flashing lights bathed the house in red and blue. The roses she'd dropped earlier were still on the floor, scattered, trampled, forgotten. Within hours, the media arrived. Cameras rolled. Headlines wrote themselves. Florida cop shoots past her husband 15 times in family home. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Cable news. Live streams. True crime blogs. Talk radio. She wasn't just Maya Richardson anymore. She was a story. A scandal. A spectacle. And the town that once admired her, began to split at the seams. Half saw a mother who did what the system wouldn't. The other half saw a badge-turned-weapon. In the court of public opinion, the trial had already begun. Whispers turned to debates. Debates turned to division. Old neighbors argued over fences. Congregants whispered behind church pews. Social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag justice for Isaiah. Hashtag Maya the mother. Hashtag no excuse for murder. Coffee shop counters buzzed with speculation. Local radio shows opened the lines. Should she walk free? Or should she be held to the law she once swore to uphold? The supporters spoke first, and loudest. She protected her son, one woman told a local reporter. What would you have done? She found that man, her husband, violating a child. She didn't have time to think. She acted. That's a mother. Another voice chimed in. Daniel Richardson was a monster in a clerical collar. How many other boys might have been next? Old stories resurfaced. Rumors that had once been shrugged off were now re-examined under a harsher light. A former church member recalled uncomfortable feelings from years ago. A teenage boy, now in his 20s, claimed Daniel once asked him to stay late for prayer counseling that didn't feel right. The picture began to sharpen. And Maya? She became more than a headline. She became a symbol. To some, she was the mother who did what Child Protective Services and law enforcement often failed to do, stop a predator before the damage multiplied. Petitions sprang up. Supporters gathered outside the jail. Protesters held signs that read, 15 shots was mercy. Protecting a child is not a crime. But across town, another narrative was taking shape. She's a cop, a former colleague said during an anonymous interview. She knew better. There are protocols. She took the law into her own hands, said a local attorney on the news. If we let that slide, what message does it send? Retired judges, legal analysts, and radio commentators flooded the airwaves. This wasn't justice, it was vigilante revenge, one said. The law is the law. What if he had surrendered? What if there had been a trial, another added. Due process exists for a reason. A father of two, attending a town hall meeting, stood up and shouted. Today, she kills her husband. Tomorrow, another cop says they felt threatened and empties a clip into someone else. Is that where we're headed? The division was no longer just about Maya. It was about what her actions meant. Was she a hero? Or a dangerous precedent? A protector? Or a killer? The debate spilled into churches. Into classrooms. Into dinner tables and town council meetings. A local pastor addressed his congregation. I do not condone what Daniel did, if the allegations are true. But I do not condone murder either. God sees all. And vengeance is not ours to take. Others pushed back. He violated a child, a woman yelled from the back pew. And you're worried about vengeance? Even the department that once honored Maya now stood at a distance. The chief gave a carefully worded statement to the press. We are cooperating with the investigation. Officer Richardson will be given due process under the law. The nature of the allegations are deeply disturbing. However, we must allow the courts to determine the facts. But facts weren't what people were debating. They were debating morality, justice, and whether laws were meant to protect order, or people. In the days that followed, Maya sat in a cell alone. No visitors. No phone calls. Only silence. She didn't ask for a lawyer right away. Didn't give interviews. Didn't weep. She sat the way she had stood in that hallway, still, quiet, waiting. Because she knew what was coming. She had worn the badge long enough to understand the machinery of justice. Knew the politics, the processes, the weight of public scrutiny. And still, she did what she did. Because in that moment, with her son broken and the truth laid bare, no law in the world could have stopped her. Outside, the town kept arguing. Lines were drawn. Sides were chosen. But inside that house, on Valentine's Day, there had been no sides. There had only been a child. And a choice. The courtroom was packed. The walls of justice hadn't seen this kind of public obsession in years. Rows of local reporters. Churchgoers clutching Bibles. Protesters outside with signs that read both, Free Maya, and, No one is above the law. The state called it the Richardson case. The media called it the trial of the year. But for Maya Richardson, it was something else entirely. It was the trial of two truths. On one side, the prosecution stood tall and sure. They painted Maya as emotionally unstable, a cop who lost control. A trained officer emptied 15 rounds into an unarmed man, the lead prosecutor told the jury. This was not defense. This was not restraint. This was execution. They showed crime scene photos, IMA. But for Maya Richardson, it was something else entirely. It was the trial of two truths. On one side, the prosecution stood tall and sure. They painted Maya as emotionally unstable, a cop who lost control. A trained officer emptied 15 rounds into an unarmed man, the lead prosecutor told the jury. This was not defense. This was not restraint. This was execution. They showed crime scene photos, images frozen in time, the body of Reverend Daniel Richardson slumped on the floor, riddled with bullet wounds. Blood across the mattress. Walls stained with violence. She didn't call for backup, the prosecutor continued. She didn't de-escalate. She didn't even hesitate. That's not protocol. That's personal. The jury shifted in their seats. The gallery was silent. Then came the defense. Their tone was quieter. Slower. Not dramatic, human. They didn't deny what Maya did. They told why. She is not here to escape consequence, Maya's lawyer began. She is here so the full truth can be told. They described a woman whose world collapsed in a single moment. A trained officer. Yes. But also a mother. A wife. Someone who had dedicated her life to upholding the law, until the law failed to protect the one person who needed her most. You will hear about years of abuse, the defense said. You will hear what that boy lived through. And you will understand why, in that instant, Maya Richardson did what she did. The jury leaned forward. They were listening now. Because this wasn't just a trial. It was a reckoning. Then came the moment no one was ready for. Isaiah took the stand. 14 years old. Small-framed. Soft-spoken. His voice trembled. His hands shook. But his words, cut through the courtroom like a blade. He told me I'd go to hell if I ever told anyone. Gasps echoed across the gallery. Maya sobbed silently at the defense table. Isaiah didn't look at her. He kept his eyes down, focused on his own shaking hands. He said it was God's test. That I had to stay quiet, or I'd ruin everything. He paused, swallowed, continued. He said I was chosen. That he loved me like a son. That this was our secret. A juror wiped away a tear. The judge asked for quiet. And still, Isaiah kept speaking. He started when I was 11. And it didn't stop. The courtroom froze. No cross-examination could erase that. No closing argument could diminish the power of a child telling the truth, at last. The next wave hit harder. The evidence. It began with emails. Hundreds of them, extracted from Daniel's private accounts. Messages to other young boys, some cryptic, others explicit. Late-night texts. Hidden folders on his computer. Photos, none pornographic, but intimate, inappropriate. Enough to sketch the profile of a man living two lives, pastor by day, predator by night. Then came testimony from church elders. One by one, they took the stand. Most were hesitant. Careful. Measured. But the words they spoke shook the courtroom. We had suspicions. One paused, glancing toward the back of the room. We didn't know, not for sure. Another admitted that years ago, a young congregant had come forward with concerns. He said Daniel made him uncomfortable. That something happened in a private prayer session. The church said they looked into it. But there was no follow-up. No police report. Just a conversation behind closed doors. A warning. A prayer. And silence. The kind that protects monsters. The kind that lets rot fester beneath robes and rituals. The kind that costs children their safety. As the days unfolded, the picture became clearer. Daniel Richardson wasn't just a pastor. He was a master manipulator. He'd built his image on scripture and charm, knew when to look holy and when to hide. He wasn't caught because no one suspected him. He was caught because Maya came home early. And for the first time, someone chose the child over the image. The prosecution tried to recover. They reminded the jury that Maya had options. She could have called it in. She could have detained him. Instead, she emptied her clip. The defense responded with silence. Then they showed the crime scene again. Not the blood. Not the body. But the broken boy in the guest room, curled in a blanket, still shaking. The officer on the stand, who arrived minutes after the shooting, testified. I've been on this job 20 years. I've never seen fear like that on a kid's face. Closing arguments were a study in contrast. The prosecution spoke of structure. Order. The importance of due process. They warned about precedent. That justice taken into one's own hands becomes vengeance. But the defense? They spoke from the heart. There are moments, the attorney said, when the law is too slow. When the system is too polite. And when that happens, someone has to stand up and say, not this time. Not this child. They pointed to Maya. She didn't shoot out of rage. She shot because she knew, if she hesitated, he would twist the truth again. She wasn't a vigilante. She was a mother. And mothers don't let predators walk away. When the jury was dismissed to deliberate, no one moved. Not the reporters. Not the protesters. Not even Maya. She just sat, hands folded, eyes closed. Waiting. Not for freedom. Not for absolution. Just, for it to be over. Because no verdict could give her back what was lost. No ruling could rebuild the life shattered in that bedroom. But the truth? The truth had finally been spoken. Out loud. On the record. And for the first time, it had been believed. In the final days of the trial, tension gripped the courtroom like a vice. The facts were no longer in dispute. Daniel Richardson had lived a double life, preacher by day, predator by night. The evidence was overwhelming. Isaiah's testimony. The emails. The photos. The witnesses who once stayed silent now finding their voices. His crimes were undeniable. But Maya's actions, those were harder to judge. The question wasn't what she did. It was whether it was justified. 15 bullets. No warning. No hesitation. No badge protocol. The prosecution called it rage. The defense called it maternal instinct. The jury was asked to decide, was Maya Richardson a grieving mother pushed past her breaking point, or a police officer who abandoned the very laws she once swore to uphold. Deliberations took 2 full days. Inside that jury room, the debate was fierce. Some jurors saw heroism. Others saw recklessness. Justice versus due process. Emotion versus restraint. There was no easy answer. And maybe that was the point. Because justice rarely is. The final verdict came on a gray Wednesday morning. Guilty. But not of murder. The jury returned a verdict of manslaughter, acknowledging the weight of what Maya had seen, and the moral reason behind what she did, but unable to ignore the cold legality of 15 shots fired outside the rule of law. The sentence: 3 years in prison. 5 years probation. Parental rights retained. The courtroom was silent. Not in protest. But in exhaustion. The kind of silence that comes after a storm. Outside, the reaction was immediate. Some cheered. Others wept. Supporters said the justice system had finally honored the complexity of a broken moment. Opponents said she should have gotten life. A former church member told reporters she may have broken the law. But if she hadn't walked in that day, who knows how long he would have kept hurting that boy. A civil rights attorney pushed back: we can't build a society on emotional justice. The law exists for a reason. The fracture that began when Maya pulled the trigger now cut deeper. In the weeks after the verdict, the town began to unravel. The church, once the heart of the community, collapsed. Membership dwindled. The board disbanded. Investigations were launched into its leadership. Whispers became testimonies. Families began confronting old stories. Questions were asked that should have been asked years ago. A few brave survivors came forward. Some too late. Others finally free. In households across town, uncomfortable conversations bloomed. About trust. About silence. About the price of protecting appearances. Because Daniel Richardson was no longer just a man. He was a mirror. And no one liked what they saw. Maya Richardson will live with her actions for the rest of her life. The court rendered its verdict. But the real sentence isn't the prison time. It's the memory. Of what she saw. What she did. And what it cost her. She didn't wait for justice. She didn't file a report or pick up a phone. She picked up a gun. 15 bullets. Each one a confession. Not in words. But in finality. A statement carved into the silence that had protected a monster for far too long. Some called her a killer. Others called her a savior. But the truth? She was both. A mother. A cop. A survivor. And this was her last confession. What would you have done if you were Maya? If you walked into your home and saw that? Would you call for backup? Would you wait for the system? Would you trust that justice would find its way through the cracks? Or would you pull the trigger too? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear from you. Because stories like these aren't just about crime. They're about conscience. And what happens when the lines between law and love are torn apart? If you're drawn to raw, unsettling true crime stories, subscribe to The Last Confession. We reveal the secrets they prayed would never come to light. Until next time, stay aware. Stay questioning. And remember, justice is never simple. But silence is always deadly.